Hello, good morning. Welcome to the Sunday Supplement. There's a red theme to the show today. Liverpool, they're unstoppable. They set a new record in European football's top leagues. They become the first team to win 20 of their opening 21 matches since the start of the season. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, he scored, then saw red during Arsenal's 1-1 draw at Crystal Palace. And Marcus Rashford, he ended a troubled week for Manchester United. He scored 2 goals. His 64 goals now in 200 appearances for United. He helped them beat Norwich 4-0 at the Theatre of Dreams. 3 men to make the magic happen this morning. Andy Dunn, he's the chief sports writer at The Mirror. Ian Ladyman is the football editor at the Daily Mail. And Jonathan Northcroft is football correspondent at the Sunday Times. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. Particularly as you guys know that this is my final show. Ian's just said this is my party shirt that I've got on today. I thought it was a serious corporate look ahead of my next role, but you obviously feel otherwise.
I just wonder if you're going out somewhere afterwards.
I'll be seeing you later at the Savoy for Vincent Company's tribute night, as you well know. But thanks very much for joining us. We'll tell you a little bit about my future and my next endeavours a little bit later on in the programme. Don't forget you can tweet the show at Sunday Sup. The best will appear on your screens over the next 90 minutes. OK, as is tradition, one final time then, let's have a look at the papers. The Mail on Sunday this morning, the record breakers. Who else but Liverpool? They're 16 points clear. It's ridiculous now at the top of the Premier League. They're 38 games unbeaten. Liverpool, the record breakers after Roberto Firmino's goal yesterday. The winner settled it against Tottenham. Andy and Jonathan were both there. The runaway Reds, the Observer, reflecting on that victory yesterday. So too to the Sunday Times. They also have a transfer story. This story's been doing the rounds the last 24 hours. Jedson Fernandez on his way on an 18-month loan to Tottenham from Benfica. Tottenham could make that move permanent, of course, if it all works out. It feels like it needs to with Tottenham's recent run of results. Sweet 16, the 16 points clear. The Sunday Telegraph this morning. Sunday Express, same again. This story here, though, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer in his press conference came out fighting yesterday, leave the Glazers alone after United's 4-0 victory over Norwich. No new deal, though, for John Stones. Doubts over his future at Manchester City in the Express. This morning, the Sun's goals put out. Rash in a rush. 200 appearances for United, 64 goals for him, 2 of them yesterday. Donny van der Beek, the Ajax midfielder. Will Manchester United sign him? No, according to the Sunday Mirror. He is off to Real Madrid. Back of the Star, fill your boots. Pep Guardiola backing Phil Foden. He's going to become the next David Silva. Silva, of course, leaving the Etihad at the end of the season. A couple of the columnists, Neil Moxley, Ancelotti needs more than backing from his bosses to sort out the mess. Everton, they sneaked a victory yesterday, though, of course. And Andy's column, we'll get on to Tottenham in part 2, but Captain Kane, he tweeted a picture of his recovery yesterday from his hamstring surgery. The long road to recovery. It's not good for Spurs, but better news for England in the summer and, of course, the Euros. OK, let's start, though, because you're at White Hart Lane yesterday. We'll get on to Tottenham in part 2, guys. Part 1, though, let's talk Liverpool in this extraordinary run. The records just keep falling, and they will do, because they just keep winning matches, Andy.
They keep winning matches, and it's so predictable how good they are. And what I would say is, now we're talking about those 20 wins in 21 games.
Yep.
And I would say that I've been in an awful lot of those 20 victories. And I can honestly say that every single one of them was deserved. You know, we can go on about they may have had the benefit maybe of some VAR decisions. You can look at yesterday's game and you can say, well, had Lo Celso, our Heung-min Son, taking gilt-edged opportunities in the second half, Tottenham might have got something, as Jose seemed to think that they deserved. But that's not true. Liverpool were quite comfortably the better side yesterday, performed better, should have had the game out of sight before Spurs had those chances. And that's been the same if you look at every game. I mean, I remember the game, the last-minute penalty against at Leicester at Anfield. And that, you know, you think, well, actually, Mane was a bit fortunate to get that penalty. And was it Albrighton who fouled him? I can't remember who it was. I think it probably was. And you think, well, that's a stroke of fortune. Well, yes, it is in isolation. But over the whole period of games, I can't think of a game when I've come away thinking, you know what, they were lucky to win that game. I've always come away thinking, actually, they were always the stronger side, they're always better organised, they're always more threatening, and it was exactly the same yesterday. They are on some sort of autopilot the way they play. They just know what they're going to do. Yesterday, they knew they were going to have an awful lot of possession. They did. At one point, it was, I think, 80% possession midway through the first half. They are so well organised defensively. I know they had a run where they didn't keep a clean sheet, but they're only conceding ones. And defensively now, that central defensive partnership of yesterday looks their best now that they've come upon mainly through injuries with Van Dijk and Gomez. We all know about the fullbacks, obviously, that goes without saying. And you just cannot see a weak link. You really are. And then the emergence...
Someone's got to find one, Andy.
Well, somebody's got to find one. So how did they find... I mean, basically, Mourinho yesterday didn't really look for a weak link. What he did was hope that he could have this low block and Liverpool would have possession and then basically try and get a quick forward to the runners in the same way that, say, against Manchester City and Manchester United did, very much in a similar way. And in a couple of occasions, Son and Moura got free yesterday on the run. But really, it's hopeful stuff. It's not trying to find a weak link. Where do you find that weak link in Liverpool? We might have thought there was an issue in midfield, a lack of creativity or not quite dynamic enough. But Jordan Henderson has just excelled himself this season. Oxlade-Chamberlain played well yesterday and was furious when he was taken off and replaced by Adam Lallana, who, for all that was said about Liverpool's kids last week against Everton, Lallana was the best player on the pitch by some distance. And he's on the bench. So I honestly, I know it sounds, well, not, defeatist in a way, but it really is hard to see. There'll be a one-off game when things won't go for them, when they might hit the bar, hit the post, they might miss a penalty, teams might get one on the break, and, someone like City, for example, you wouldn't call it either way now. On a neutral ground, City v Liverpool, I wouldn't particularly call it either way. But the idea that they can go on, have any sort of implosion, is just unthinkable.
Yeah.
That every challenge that they face on or off the field, they overcome it. But how are they doing it?
Well, they do. I mean, I was at the Club World Cup, and that's going to stay with me for the rest of the season, because that was an example of taking them to a different time zone, taking them to a different environment against opponents they'd never seen before, opponents who'd really prepared for the tournament, difficult games, and they just found that way to win that Andy's talking about. And they do remind me of that invincible Arsenal team. Maybe the United 2008 team, where you've got brilliant attacking players, but just such a foundation in terms of physique and defensive capability. You've got Alisson, who's saved the last 17 shots that he's faced, which is ludicrous. 13 hours without conceding a goal, and that's before you get to what they can do in attack. So I don't think there's an answer at the moment to how they're going to get beaten. I really don't. They might have games where it doesn't go for them.
But for the sport, OK, great for Liverpool supporters, but for the sport, somebody's got to find a way to beat them in the Premier League.
Not necessarily. I would say that for the sport, it's really important that the bar is high. Yeah. And if they're going to, and Manchester City have set the bar incredibly high last 2 or 3 seasons. If Liverpool can keep the bar that high, or for argument's sake, even raise that bar, then that's only good for the Premier League. So if Liverpool go all season unbeaten, and deservedly so, which I don't think they will. I think they'll lose a game once they've won the league. That could well happen. They'll win the league and then they'll drop off because they'll probably have the Champions League on their minds by then, and they might lose a game. But if Liverpool go unbeaten all season, I think that's good for the Premier League, because it just tells everybody else, all those other clubs who have kind of been making mistakes for years now, trying to catch people like City and making a very poor job of it. That will tell them that, well, we're not going to come back to you, you've got to come back to us. And that can only raise the standard of the Premier League going forward.
Yeah. The quality of the team will clearly stand the test of time, there's no question about that. Where are they in terms of the greatest teams that you've had the privilege to watch in your career?
Oh, I would say...
Are they there,
no,
or what do they have to do?
Well, they have to win the Premier League for a start off, which they are going to do. But, I think you should all... Jurgen Klopp yesterday said, listen, we're not getting trophies for going 38 games unbeaten. We're not getting trophies for winning 20 out of 21. We're not getting trophies for having 61 points. We'll get the trophy when we win the Premier League. And I think, listen, you can't... It's like when people say, well, is this the best Liverpool team of all time? Well, no. But no, it's not. No, it's like, there was a team in 77 that was very close to winning the treble, that won the league, that won the European Cup for the first time, which of course is a seminal moment in the club's history, and were only narrowly beaten in the FA Cup final that year, and probably unjustly, some people would say, well, undeservedly. So no, you can't. And there was a Liverpool team. There was a Liverpool team actually that won back-to-back titles. That won 3 titles, I think, in the early 80s, probably 82, 83, 81. When anyway, you can't. This was an era of domination.
But the
and
greatest
brilliant
teams
football.
Not necessarily Liverpool, but the greatest teams you've had the privilege to watch? That I include.
Well, I'll tell you what I'm
the Milan
saying.
teams.
No, I wouldn't. I would say they're
Barcelona,
amongst the most effective
09
teams.
and 11.
No, I mean at the moment not, because of what they won, and also in terms of if you ask me, they are by some way the most effective team I've seen for a long time, if not I've ever seen. Are they the best team that I've watched that I've seen? Well, I would probably say, if you said to me, right, which team would you pay your money to see over the last couple of seasons? I would say Manchester City, and I still think that on the eye, Manchester City are a slightly easier watch than Liverpool.
Seriously?
Yes. I would say so. I would say, for example, our 20-25-minute spell against United.
I don't disagree.
Just the style of football. That's not to denigrate it, because it's fantastic to see how they play.
Yeah, you'd be happy watching either.
Oh yes, I would be happy watching it. But if we were trying to say, well, what's the best team? You've seen that Barcelona team. Well, no, you'd watch that Barcelona team.
Morning, noon and night.
Yes, of course you would.
It's a premature conversation because they need, as Andy's touched upon there, they need to win the Premier League and then need to win it again. They need to win and win and win before you even begin to have conversations about whether they are a match for Fergie's best Manchester United team or even the recent Manchester City team that's gone back-to-back in the Premier League. They have to win and then they have to win again.
Have they redefined the way the game is played without an obvious number 9? So if we look at Bayern Munich with Lewandowski, very, very obvious number 9. Tottenham, a very obvious number 9, the goal scorer. They've done this a different way.
They have. I mean, I suppose that's taking a little leaf out of the Pep playbook, who's succeeded with false nines.
But he's
before.
He's got the number 9, hasn't he?
He has now, but I mean, at Barcelona, he arguably didn't. And what he did was he had wide scorers like David Villa or Eto'o, and that's what Liverpool have done. And I suppose Firmino represents so much about Liverpool, which is that he's the all-round player, and it's an all-round team. And he also, I think, if there's one thing this Liverpool team maybe lacks, it doesn't have those players who you'd say are the all-time greats. You know, it's not like that Barcelona 2011 team. It's not even like City at the moment, where you're looking at De Bruyne and you think, well, that's a player. David Silva,
become one.
and he's the one that could be the one that we remember as an icon. So it's a team performance rather than the individual thing. And I suppose the next level would be if people like Van Dijk continue to grow. Alexander-Arnold could be one of the best English players we've ever seen. He's still at the start of his career, but his capacity is incredible.
You know what, John? He's such a young man. Of course, he's having a brilliant career. There's no question. What else can he do? He's got a lot, isn't he?
Yeah. But he strikes you as a lad that won't rest. So I think he would just tell you that he wants to win.
Hang on, you say what else?
850 games.
You say what else can he do? I mean, what do you think Ryan Giggs would say if you said that to him now? You know, Ryan Giggs would have retired. Well, if he looks back in his career, it might follow that rationale. Ryan Giggs would have hung up his boots when he was 22. You know, that's what. No, but seriously, that is what else you do. You become a serial winner. Yeah. That's how you become a truly great player. You become a serial.
It'll be interesting to see how he develops. Sorry, in the sense that another player who played exceptionally well against Everton for Liverpool was Neco Williams at right back in the Alexander-Arnold position, and he actually looked like a player who played exactly in his mould. So maybe Alexander-Arnold will, as some people suggest, move further up the field. I think in the whole Liverpool discussion, you cannot underestimate the effect that Klopp's had there. I mean, he is just a force of nature. You know, yesterday after the game, he was, basically just making sure that there was no even elements of complacency, and he just gets everything right. He just gets it all. He just gets the club. He just, he clearly lifts those players to a level that maybe some of them didn't think they could reach. He's just an incredibly inspirational manager, and I just think that his role in it just cannot be underestimated. And it's not, obviously, but
what has he got?
I'll tell you what. Without quickly name dropping, we did dinner when we had a dinner in the north recently. So we've all dealt with Klopp in a professional capacity, and on this occasion, it fell to me to sit with him at dinner, and I hadn't done that before. And you go there with this thinking, right? Well, we'll find out now. Is this all a facade? Is this an act? Is this whatever? Is he really this inspirational? You know what? After 3 hours of dinner, I wanted to run through brick walls for the guy. He really is that. He really is too good to be true in that sense.
Did he make sure you finish your dinner?
Yeah. Whereas Pep was just getting everything organised.
Pep's moving around the pots.
Basically, yes. And Klopp, and everyone, he had the table. Fellow managers were hanging on his every word. He was just full of energy and enthusiasm. And as you know, when managers normally come to these functions, it's like, well, when's it happening? When can they get away? And normally the engine isn't switched off outside in their car. So, he was just... And you came away, and everyone he came into contact with that night had the same thing. So he's like that for that small snapshot. You can see why the players are like they are.
What did you talk about? What did you talk about?
All sorts, everything.
Klopp didn't get to say much.
No, he didn't.
Klopp did a lot of listening that night, didn't he?
No, he didn't, actually. No, go on, you carry it. No, go on.
No, I was just saying that when you have I suppose when you have a squad like Liverpool's, kind of a kind of bespoke set of players, world-class players, I suppose what it falls to you as a coach, I suppose, to do two things, which is to make sure that they play the game properly, but also to make sure that the atmosphere in that club, in that dressing room, at that training ground every day is spot on. And that points to a little bit of what Andy's talking about there. It points to Klopp's personality. It talks about his ability to be a figure of authority, but also a figure who players feel they can confide in. And I think that is why you see that squad, and you mentioned Lallana. Why is a player like Lallana? Why is a player like, say, Dejan Lovren? Why is a player like Shaqiri? I'm talking about players who are kind of in and around the edges of the team. You never hear them moaning, do you? No. Never hear them moaning. You never hear them suggest that maybe they might want to go somewhere else to play, because you know what? He's got something there where a player like that obviously thinks it's better to play 20 games for Liverpool a season than 50 somewhere else.
I was just going to say, you look at their Wikipedia page and it's going to say Champions League final 2 years ago, Champions League winner last season, almost certainly Premier League winner this season.
They're like the Nicky Butts and Phil Nevilles, aren't they, of the Liverpool team? But
they're collecting trophies.
They are. I mean, I think what I notice about Klopp is he empowers people. He doesn't just inspire them. He doesn't try and control them, like I think a lot of top managers have got that kind of aura where they want to be in control. And you just look at the little things, the little interactions Klopp has with his press people, for example, the sort of staff around the club. He doesn't want to dominate them. He wants to push them on. He told a story once about when he arrived at Liverpool in his first week. He was asked, what time do you want the bus to leave for Anfield? And he was like, "Why are you asking me? I've only just arrived." And they said to him, "But the manager always makes that decision." And he said, "Well, not now. Why would I make that decision?" And I think there's lots and lots of little things around that club where he gives people their head. He's clearly the leader, but it's an idea of being empowered, wanting to succeed for him rather than because he's telling them to do something.
Yeah. It's another big win for Liverpool yesterday. Firmino's goal settling things against Jose Mourinho's Tottenham side. It's another defeat for them. They're 4 without a win now under Mourinho. They need to do something about it, and something pretty quick. We're going to talk about Tottenham in part 2 of today's programme. That's coming next. We've just been talking about managers who name check us when they see us at matches and press conferences. I'm going to hedge a bet. I'm not a betting man, that Dunny might get a mention of Jose Mourinho the next time he sees him. I know you don't write the headlines, Dunny.
No, I don't. No.
Just as well. Just as well. That's your only excuse here. Mirror. Jurgen showed why Jose is yesterday's man. That's your piece. Normally I'd go to the other guests at the start of part 2, but because we're going to talk about Tottenham, Mourinho, the decorated coach, failing to move with the times. Natural caution now costing his team dear. Only when Mourinho was forced to move the bus further upfield into opposition territory did Spurs look like getting something from the game.
Yeah, well, there was an innate caution about him yesterday. I guess you might say it's understandable considering Liverpool's record. But even so, I think when you're the home team and a team of Spurs standing, to surrender possession that readily, and we know he's done in the past. That's been his speciality: winning games, having less possession than the opposition. He's done it famously. He did it famously with Inter against Barca, I think, in the Champions League semi-final. And that is his modus operandi, and it's also one that actually works quite a lot this season for other teams as well. I mean, probably quite a few. I'm just off the top of my head. United's wins have probably come in games when they haven't dominated possession. However, yesterday, I didn't really quite see what his plan was, other than to have what you would call a very low block, almost 2 banks of 5, and just allow Liverpool to have possession and hopefully nick it back and get it forward quickly and get the runners, the likes of Son and Lucas Moura, going. And that was about it. And to be frank, it looked fairly simplistic and fairly basic compared to the way the Klopp has set about things this season. and has said about things over the last couple of seasons and the way that Pep Guardiola does, you just get the feeling that even though, as it happens, the scoring record under Mourinho at Spurs is good. I think it's probably a couple of goals a game up until yesterday. Probably average. You know, you can't say that he's parked the bus in other games. In this one in particular, though, I just thought that maybe Klopp's got inside his head. He's got a poor track record against Klopp. He's only beaten him twice in 11 attempts. So maybe that just got to him. And it just looked like one team were progressive, loved having possession. The other team really were cautious, were wary, were men behind the ball, and actually didn't look great in possession. And I just thought that was the contrast between the two.
Well, they've lost their attacking weapons, haven't they?
Of course.
Tottenham. Recently and over time, if you think about it, obviously they've lost Kane to injury. Ali's in and out, form-wise. Eriksen doesn't look terribly interested. And then you go back further into Pochettino's time. They lost, Walker, Trippier. The players who really used to give the great, what you might call the best Tottenham side, that real danger in possession, bit by bit, drip by drip. They've lost them. And Tottenham at the moment, and this is only, you could say this isn't Jose's fault at all. The tactics are down to him, but the personnel isn't at the moment. He's working with a squad, a team that's greatly diminished from the one that Pochettino was working with when it was at its best.
They've also got a declining defence, which I think Poch was starting to talk about. Alderweireld, again, looked a bit over the hill yesterday. That might be one of the reasons that Jose went so defensive. I think it's a bit unfair to sort of blame him for yesterday's game, but where I'd agree with Dunny is that he's a reactive coach, and we're in an era, we've just talked about Klopp, of coaches who grab hold of games and dominate and have a blueprint.
Yes.
And those are the best ones. And that's never really been his style. He's always been a reactive coach that's had better players generally, or the Inter was almost an anomaly, that win against Barcelona. But it's just whether that's out of time.
And it's brilliant to that. No one should, in any way, sort of cheapen his achievements, because they've been absolutely fantastic. There's no getting away from that. He's won a lot more than Jurgen Klopp has won. He is a serial winner. At the moment, you would just say that his approach to the game just slightly jars with the approach of the two stellar coaches of the last two seasons in the Premier League. Simple as that. Now, I understand what you're saying. They haven't got the personnel at Manchester City.
This is what Tottenham knew they were getting.
Yes.
This is the coach they knew they were getting. They made a very pragmatic decision and they had to with Pochettino, because that one had run its course, as we all know. But they made a decision to replace the type of coach that you're talking about, Johnny, a coach who'll go and grab hold of a game and shape it into the way that he wants it to be, attacking-wise, to a coach who will do the opposite. And why did they do it? They did it because they felt they needed to win. They need to win trophies. That is why they did it. And so it's up to Jose now to deliver that half of the bargain, because you'll never deliver the other bit. You'll never. He's not interested in that. It's not what he does. So he's got to win. He's got to win, and he's got to start winning next season, I would suggest.
Did we see any signs of this Champions League final last season when Tottenham reached the final? Okay, they lost to Liverpool, but Liverpool used it as the springboard for the following season to go and win the competition. They ran Manchester City close in the Premier League. A lot of people, certainly including myself, predicted, okay, now you've almost touched it. You've come within inches of winning the biggest club trophy in European football. Now go and win it, either Premier League or Champions League. They just fall away.
Yeah, Liverpool, as you say, are a team that's still going upwards and still going in steps, where Spurs look like they've reached the top of the staircase and now they're on the way down a little bit, and we might talk about Harry Kane, but he's perhaps one sort of symbol of that now, sort of getting into his late 20s, starting to get injuries. Is Dele going to be the player that we thought he might develop into? And then you've got that ageing defence. And the new stadium obviously means that there's going to be spending problems as well. So you're now looking at a rebuild. You're looking at a coach who we're wondering, still a good coach, but is he among the best anymore? And I think it's a huge crossroads for Tottenham. Massive crossroads.
But he needs players, doesn't he?
They're about to bring on Jetson Fernandes from Benfica. 18-month. What does the 21 years old Portuguese international? What does an 18-month loan deal say to you about that move?
Well, it says
it's unusual.
It's unusual, and then it is with, if I'm if I'm not mistaken, is with an obligation to buy at the end of the 18 months if he plays. I think it's half the games, maybe. I don't know. I think it's if he plays a certain amount of games. I think it may be half, maybe more. Then there's an obligation to buy the 18 months for 55 million euros. I think West Ham were trying to come to a similar arrangement, but Spurs appear to have come to that arrangement. It tells you that neither party. Well, it tells you that Spurs aren't sure, and that neither party sure. Particularly as the player himself has been having some issues with Benfica by all accounts this season. So, you know, it's not the type of signing that is going to get you out of your seats at this moment because of the doubts surrounding it. Certainly, that sort of deal strikes you as, well, you're getting him in January for a start-off, so Benfica happy to let him go in January on this sort of extended loan. It just gives you an element that there's an uncertainty about whether they think it's the right thing or not.
It's the type of deal that you do when you need bodies. The type of deal you do when you need bodies and you don't want to spend an awful lot of money to get them. That is the type of deal that looks like to me.
I think it's another sign of Spurs declining a bit because they used to be so good in the transfer market. They used to be ahead of the curve, and that looks a fairly reactive deal. As you say, need bodies, not sure whether they really want to make it permanent. When did they last make that absolutely brilliant, that Christian Eriksen or that Dele Alli signing? I mean, it's 3 or 4 years now, isn't it? They've been accumulating players without getting much better.
And the one thing they've never managed to do is find an understudy for Kane. The one thing they've never managed to do is to find a centre forward who's good enough to be an understudy for Kane, but also happy to spend most of his life on the bench. You know, they tried it with Vincent Janssen, didn't work. They tried it with Llorente, didn't work. And when things like this happen, Kane gets injured because the load is too great on him. Jose talks about it being England's fault. It's not England's fault. It's Tottenham's fault. He's played too much football. He's now got a muscle injury that's going to keep him out for a while. There's no understudy.
You've written about Kane this morning as well, haven't you? Because that injury, of course, is affecting Tottenham's season. He's one of the best number 9s in the world. No one would doubt that. But you think, Andy,
it could
selfishly for England.
Selfishly, obviously very selfishly. It is a sort of utopian idea that he's going to come back sort of mid-April, have a couple of games, club games before the end of the season, and be absolutely fit and raring to go for the Euros, and we'll see the best Harry Kane in an England shirt, because it sounds odd to say, but, you know, although he won the Golden Boot at World Cup 2018, he tapered off in that tournament quite dramatically. You know, the last 4 games, he really did look physically and mentally on the point of exhaustion in those last 4 games. The previous tournament, Euro 2016, again, he didn't have a good tournament, but again, he played 50 games for Spurs in the preceding season, 15-16, 50 games, and had actually gone to the under-21s Euros in the summer of 2015, with friendlies either side of that in the summer, remember, for Spurs. So basically, he'd been on the go for a long time, like he was ahead of 2018. And I just think, you know, as I say, it seems strange to say it, but, you know, if Harry Kane had been absolutely at his peak, fit and firing, then England might have won that World Cup. You know, had he took that chance in the semi-final, or maybe squared to Raheem Sterling, they might have won. Had he been sort of at his fittest, and I just got the impression that he wasn't, and that was because of the incredible workload which Ian has just referred to, took its toll on him. And I say this idea from an English supporter's point of view, and I'm sure from what Gareth will be hoping is, listen, you know, this at least now he's not going to be going into the Euros with a workload of 50 Spurs games under his belt.
Yeah. What those March friendlies? What will Southgate turn to, like for like, or is it the Tammy Abraham style striker that is the obvious replacement?
Yeah, you would think so, wouldn't you? I mean, Tammy has had a season that I think has exceeded the expectations of most of us in terms of his age, and he's still going. I'm always of a mind that when you get this close to a major tournament, it's too late to experiment with players. I think but I think I'm in the minority here, but I've always said that you try to move towards a tournament with a set team, and therefore, so you lose your striker, so what you do is you don't then think, right, you know what, let's go and pull Danny Ings in, he scored some goals, let's pull him in, give him a couple of games. Great respect to Danny Ings, I'm not sure at this stage that's the way to go. What I would do is use your squad. You know, Gareth always says that he's got an idea in his head of what his team, his best kind of 13, 14 would be. Bring one of those players in for the next game. That would be Tammy, I guess.
I do get that, but I think there's an exception to the rule, which would be Jack Grealish.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah.
There's a case for one player, maybe, to a special player to emerge.
Yeah.
And fair enough to Gareth Southgate that he hadn't seen Grealish extended run in the Premier League, but he has now. And he's surely that 23rd member of the squad that could just provide a difference. Yeah, I think he has to play in the next game.
Back to Tottenham then. Has Mourinho got to rebuild this team? Refresh this squad and rebuild it?
He does. He looks like he needs a new defence. He needs to solve the Harry Kane understudy problem, as we've touched on. He needs to replace Eriksen. In fact, I think the Eriksen situation needs sorted out as quickly as possible for Spurs. He was flat yesterday, booed off, wasn't he?
How did you feel? How did you feel about that? Because this is a guy that we believe this has always been in the air that Eriksen wants to play in another country before his career comes to an end. If that is correct, why isn't that being respected?
Yeah, I think they made a strategic mistake, and this goes back to my point about recruitment. They haven't been as clever. They should have sold him in the summer when everyone knew he wanted to go. It's left him in a kind of limbo. It's left the fans in a limbo with him. I think it's a hangover as well from, we're talking about Poch and that sense of a great cause that he created. And I think Eriksen was the first one to kind of almost put his hand up and say, actually, I don't believe in it anymore. Yeah. And he's become maybe a symbol of what could have been. So I think he has to move this window. I think it's just a situation that isn't good for anyone.
It's not good for anyone. It wasn't nice yesterday, was it, to hear him booed off? But you can understand, the fans' reaction in it. That he's running down his contract to get out. Yes, they should have sold him. I presume they didn't because they didn't have an appropriate bid. People kept saying, well, Real Madrid this, Real Madrid that, and by all accounts, it didn't materialise. But you're right. He should go this window. Or I think that would Jose. I think he still has got the personnel to turn around and say to Eriksen, listen, you're leaving this club and not playing for the rest of the season. I know, it sounds dramatic. I know you should always say, well, he's one of your players, you should play him.
But he's in the team, doesn't he?
Yes, I know.
So why? So
I don't understand why
if
he's
in the team
yesterday.
that would appear to suggest that Jose thinks that he hasn't got anyone adequate replacement. Yeah. So you move him on this window, there's a whole new team.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well, yes, but were they better without him on the pitch yesterday? Absolutely, they were. Were they better when they brought Lo Celso? Yes, they were.
Okay. Right, fellas, I'm going to leave you for the next 15 minutes to run the show.
Is this an audition?
Pleading the fifth.
You want? Someone's got to sit in this chair from next week. It won't be me. Got to talk Man United next. Oh, go on then. I'm still here. Andy Dunn's with us this morning, Ian Ladyman and Jonathan Northcroft as well. Let's have a look at the back pages, remind you what's on them this morning. Mail on Sunday, the record breakers, Liverpool. Andy and Jonathan were both at White Hart Lane, New Tottenham Stadium yesterday to watch Liverpool win Roberto Firmino's goal. They're now 16 points clear, Liverpool 38 games unbeaten, Liverpool unstoppable. They're the runaway Reds. That's the Observer's front page this morning. Everyone reflecting, of course, on that sweet 16, as do the Sunday Telegraph. Manchester United, according to the Sunday Mirror, chasing Donny van der Beek. Donny van der Beek. It's Donny van der Beek, though. That's the headline. Instead of Manchester United, he's going to Real Madrid, according to Simon Mullock this morning. Spurs about to sign Gedson Fernandes from Benfica. It's an initial 18-month loan. We've just been talking about Tottenham and their problems. Fill your boots. Guardiola says that Phil Foden is going to be the next David Silva, the obvious replacement for Silva when he retires or leaves Manchester City at the end of the season. And Manchester United, a subject which we're going to talk about now. Rashford scoring twice yesterday against Norwich. A 4-0 victory for them at Old Trafford. Right. I'm sure we can all be very, very professional while we talk Manchester United business. Of that, I've got no doubt around this table because of the integrity of the journalists I've got sat alongside me. Manchester United did win 4-0 yesterday. Ian, they needed that result though, right?
Well, they need a run of results. That's what they need. I mean, the kind of the chart of Manchester United's season, if you were to look at it, would be one that would show you peaks like that one, if you can call a victory over the worst team in the Premier League a peak, followed by some pretty low troughs. Now, some of those peaks have come against good sides. Some of the troughs have come against poor sides. Doesn't really matter. The fact is that Manchester United are not a team that win consistently, and that is what they need to be. The squad isn't good enough and deep enough. We can talk about the manager, which would probably take up the rest of the show if we wanted to. The fact is that United haven't got no, I'm fed up of reading that Manchester United have turned a corner. United have turned so many corners this season that I'm surprised that they're still standing upright. For me, they're just stuck in this kind of circle and they go round and round and round. And until they can have another transfer window or times 3, like the one that they had last summer, which, to be fair to them, was a decent window. The 3 players that they bought have all done well for them. Until they can have more windows like that, and until somebody works out whether they have got the right manager or not, I suspect they probably haven't. But until we work that conundrum out, I think that Manchester United fans can spend as many Saturday afternoons singing pretty inappropriate songs about the chief executive as they like, but it won't change until they get better players and the right manager.
Difficult atmosphere to operate in yesterday at times. When Manchester United scored their 3rd goal, then the atmosphere changed at Old Trafford.
There's been an accumulation at United that, for the reasons Ian talks about, of discontent among the fans, and that came on top of a Manchester derby where there were 7,000 empty seats, which I never thought I'd see in 20 years of covering United fairly closely. Big game like that, can't sell it out. And then you look at the attendances are, I think, the lowest in 10 years. They're going to be even lower when they publish this season's figures, and there's a kind of fatigue among supporters at seeing this once great club just not being what it was. So it is a difficult it's a difficult club at the moment. One of the reasons that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer arrived was to try and lift the mood of that club, and personally I think he's done as much as he could to do that, and it comes back primarily to what Ian says about players. The players aren't at the standard that United need. Solskjaer's actually created a few good players by giving youngsters a chance. Williams and Greenwood, he's almost sort of, brought those players in himself.
Yep.
So I think he's doing as much as he can. And I thought the chance against the Glazers and Woodward, while they were repugnant and sort of send a chill down the spine, quite honestly, that particular song, I do understand why Ed Woodward gets the focus of the anger, and it's because I think he's a well-meaning man, but he's made himself in charge of recruitment, and it's the recruitment that's not good enough. And he's chosen to go down that path, so he's a man that needs to solve it by signing better players.
But is he in charge of recruitment? I mean, that's one of the sort of mysteries. We know from what we've been told that there has been considerable investment and expansion of their recruitment departments. I think where it suffers is that we don't really know. Ed Woodward doesn't have the final say on signings, does he?
It's a mechanics.
Not in the way, say, that a director of football would. So, at, say, for example, I don't know, pick a club off the top of your head, so Everton, you know that Marcel Brands really, has one of the final vetoes, if not the final veto, on transfers, and that happens to other clubs. Now, we're not trying to say that Woodward has that final veto.
You're right, Don. I should clarify.
But I think that message should get across. I mean, basically, he's not signing the players. He's a touchstone for criticism because they're not going to criticise Ollie because, quite rightly, he's a very popular figure at Old Trafford, and they generally get behind managers like good supporters do. So then you need a touchstone for that. It was the Glazers, going back, when that sort of seemed to die down. And now it's re-emerged.
I should clarify that. Just on Woodward, he's not in charge of recruitment in the sense that he's choosing the players, but he's the one that's executing the deals, and directors of football do the two things. So he chooses to execute the deals, and I think the complaint is not enough deals.
And what he hasn't done, when United had a problem when Alex Ferguson left. Had a problem because, as we know, Fergie did the transfers at United in a kind of very kind of old-fashioned way. It would be disrespectful to say it was written on the back of a fag packet, but it was. But you know what I mean? It was kind of all in Fergie's head. That's what I'm saying, and it worked because apart from a few misses, like all managers have.
His brother worked alongside him.
He was good at it on the whole. I would say that Fergie's judgment had started to go towards the end of his reign, but
when he signed Robin van Persie.
Well, you could have signed Robin van Persie. Well, in fact, you may well be before long, or his equivalent.
Yes.
But we'll get to that. And when Fergie left, he took all that with him. He took that kind of way of working with him.
Yes.
And United were all of a sudden left with it's almost like look, this is the recruitment and kind of scouting room. Let's open the door. Open the door. Nothing there. There's nothing there. So they needed a system. They needed to catch up. They need to find a way of doing it, and it's taken them far too long. And that is Ed's fault. You could argue, by the way, they're getting there now. They are getting there. But it's taken too long.
And they've undoubtedly got the processes in place and the checks and balances you'd expect of a top Premier League club. There's no question about that. You're a big believer in Solskjaer and his ability.
I'm a big believer in his the role he's performing now, which is, I think, it's essentially a transitional role to refocus the club into what it should be. In terms of development, in terms of meaning, in terms of identity. There are wider questions as to whether he can take that club on, whether he can tactically compete against the top managers. But I actually think they're not actually at that point yet as a football club. They need to make that transition. And I see him doing quite a similar job to Frank Lampard at Chelsea at the moment, and he's only a few points behind with far inferior players. And I don't quite get the ire that gets sort of poured at Solskjaer.
But the first half on, just to play devil's advocate, the first half on Tuesday night was his fault.
You're definitely making a pitch for this job.
Look how good City's team was.
That's my job.
Mate, come on, he's a manager of Manchester United. You can't go in to a Manchester derby and say, oh my God, look at how good Man City are. David Moyes has said that. David Moyes has said that, by the way. He'd been run out of town even quicker than he was. It's Ollie's job to find a way. And those players on Tuesday in the first half weren't running hard enough, weren't doing the basics. And I'm sorry. Now, Ollie might say that's a one-off. People watch Manchester United every week might say it's a one-off. Has happened before. It's happened before. Ollie said on pre-season this summer that the reason it happened at the end of last season was that they weren't fit enough. So the players had to be fitter. So I presume he's corrected that. So why does that happen? Yeah, he's playing a good side. We know they're playing a good side.
A team that had been in the Premier League a couple of weeks before.
But why does that happen on Tuesday, the first half, Johnny? Why does that happen?
No, he didn't read in any way what Guardiola's doing. I do take that
or
point.
React.
But or react until half-time. But you look at the two teams, and you look at the fact City have done that to United at Old Trafford for the last 4 or 5 years. And I'm not sure if any manager was really going to get a better result than if you look at the last 2 results against City. I'm not sure if you.
Well, no one could have read that formation, could they? No one could have read that line.
But he didn't react.
Yes, I know you've got to react to it.
Latest point,
but I agree, and I just think it's moments like that. It's halves of football like that United produce. They're basically put a dent in what they're trying to do. Because what United fans are, it's a hard sell, but what they're trying to be sold is this recalibration of basically the Woodward and Solskjaer have got this shared vision. And like Johnny says, it's very similar to Chelsea. In other words, let's build the future on young players, on young British players, on homegrown talent. Like Chelsea are, and like United with their promotion of their young players, Greenwood, etc., and Rashford obviously at the forefront, they're trying to do. So that then demands, so why does Solskjaer suffer from a different critical analysis than Frank Lampard does, for example?
I'm not saying, by the way.
So Frank Lampard is seen as the brightest young manager in the Premier League, and Solskjaer is seen as someone who basically is probably not going to cut it.
I think Chelsea, to be fair, Chelsea haven't had it until yesterday. Haven't had a great one recently. I think Chelsea have done some things under Frank that United haven't done under Ollie. Personally, I've seen a real change in that Chelsea side. The way that there's a real purpose, a real kind of understanding. Players playing in the right positions helps. Players playing clearly to a tactical plan, well motivated. I don't always see that at Manchester United. I see a lot of change at Manchester United. I noticed that Juan Mata was suddenly back in the team yesterday. I'm not saying for 1 minute that Ollie should be sacked or anything like that. Ollie needs the one thing they need to do is to give Ollie more time and to prove people like me wrong, and he might. I'm not saying he's 100% the wrong person for the job. He has to be given some more time. I'm just saying I'm not convinced. I'm absolutely not convinced.
It's getting the players. I do think, and I think this is where Ed Woodward suffers, is there's no clear direction on who is signing the players, who are they targeting, what names are they trying to get in, who is responsible, for not getting this player or for getting this player, who signed Fred, who signed, etc., etc. And
if you were Manchester United, would you make that kind of information public on whose fault it was who didn't sign this player or didn't negotiate here.
If you had a director of football, it was clear, instead of this sort of, what would you call it, holistic approach really to recruitment?
Collegiate.
You know, I understand collegiate, you know, we've got these names, we're putting them, and it goes through a certain department and narrows it down. I do think that, you know, we sort of know who's in charge of executing the signings at Manchester City. We know who it is at Liverpool, and Liverpool's obviously much vaunted technical department, if you want to call it that. And that's just, I just think it will give you the touchstone. Actually, you know what? Woodward's not to blame, you know. These are, say, for example, if Ollie has the final veto. I mean, I'm sure he does.
I mean, one of their messages these days, Ash will tell us shortly, is that
shortly when? Today?
Believe you me, Lado, there's so much I'd like to say here, but respect to the integrity.
They tell us, don't they, that they are moving and that they are sorting, that they have shuffled that pack and they now have it right. And they could say, look, James and Wan-Bissaka and Maguire are indications that we have finally moved on from the era of Di Maria and Falcao and Sanchez and Schweinsteiger and on and on and on.
But the final point here, Andy.
But what I don't know is whether that is evidence or whether they just had a really lucky summer.
What I was going to say,
I don't know.
The whole point is, as well as you'll find out, no doubt, one of the problems is that they're judged by different standards. You know, when you see a club with, I think the latest value on the New York Stock Exchange was, you know, £4 billion or something like that. When you see a club like that, and you see a club so commercially driven, and so many deals, so many whatever, you are then judged in a different context. You're judged as one of the world's biggest clubs. You know, you are judged on a different level than even someone like Chelsea, and that's the problem they've got. You are in a completely different sort of ballpark to most other clubs on how you're perceived. So you can trumpet all your multi-million-pound deals, but then if you've got a midfield that gets overrun by City, then you get hammered.
At least they won yesterday. I'm going to finish off on that. Manchester United beat Norwich 4-0. I wonder why. OK, next up, we're going to talk a little bit about Arsenal, talk Leicester as well, and the Everton expert as well, Andy. We'll talk about events at Goodison Park too. Let's talk the Arsenal revolution. Mikel Arteta, the man to save their season. 1-2. Drawn 2. Lost 1. Is he the man to save their season? Drew at Palace yesterday, of course, Aubameyang scoring, and then later being sent off at Selhurst Park in that 1-1 draw.
And you could say it was a very typical Arsenal-ish, as in Arsenal-ish of the last few years' performance, in that they started brilliantly and then were sort of ground down by maybe a team that outworked them and challenged them and played cutely, and in the end, you know, Palace maybe could have won it. I think Arteta's been acclaimed very, very quickly by fans and by a few of our colleagues, and I think there's a desperation to see him do well. I think people would like to see him do well. I think we've got to wait, because for me it's based around a brilliant game against Manchester United where they were superb, a really good half against Chelsea in a game they didn't win, and the rest has been a bit so-so. I wouldn't blame him for that. It's just a bit too early to sort of put the crown on his head. And, you know, we keep talking about players and stuff, but then another team, we can make the point where until the squad's better, the team's better, less patchy, then you can't really judge a coach.
What are these performances a reflection of? I would say that Tottenham, Manchester United and Arsenal are in a similar bracket in terms of the inconsistency. Leicester will come on to, but I think that's different. Suddenly their season is starting to unravel, or there are doubts. But before that, they were win. But there is an inconsistency. You don't know. We saw Arsenal play so well against Manchester United. Then against Leeds, it's ordinary, overwhelmed at times, but somehow still managed to win. And then yesterday's, well, that's back to what it was when Unai Emery was in charge.
I think Arsenal and United, there's long-standing problems in the team that just haven't been fixed over years, over different transfer windows. With Arsenal, it's defence. United, it's probably midfield. Spurs is maybe a different case. It's probably a cyclical thing. But, you know, there's a number of players at all of those clubs who are not quite top players because they're good in some moments and they're not so good in others. And David Luiz is probably the ultimate example of an Arsenal player like that. You could say
you're a great believer in. You think Arsenal have got it right behind the scenes, don't you? And you think that you're a great champion of their kind of the system that they've got in place now, the type of system that probably we're talking about Manchester United could do with. You think that will bear fruit in the next 3 or 4 years, don't you?
I think they put more structure in than United, and I like their idea of bringing more players through from Hale End, from the academy, but they have to have the right coach to do that. But I'm not. I mean, I'll be honest. The last transfer window left me a bit confused about the recruitment. The Pepe signing in particular made me think maybe they haven't learnt as much from the past as before.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, the fundamental thing is the squad does look imbalanced. I mean, I think why people are, pretty quick to suggest that Arteta, will make a good job of it. It's just because he comes across so well, and of course the fact that, don't forget, he comes with a lot of credit, even though he hasn't been number one, but he comes with a lot of credit from just by very nature. You think, well, if he's learning from Pep Guardiola every single day on the training pitch, then he's got to have learned something. Because the one thing about Guardiola, which you hope that Arteta will have taken from him, I'm sure he will, is this intense coaching of players. The two managers, well, obviously, if City win their game, win today and go second, the two managers at the top of the league will not be managers, they will be coaches. They coach these players intensely. You only have to see behind the scenes footage, that we've all seen of both clubs to see that. And I think Arteta will be able to put on those coaching sessions in the way that Guardiola did. And I think that's what gives people hope, that he will improve players there, that he will improve Torreira, that he will improve the younger players in the squad and build something. And he'll be given time, and he comes across well, and that might be a superficial thing, but it counts for something. And I think that's why there's a general mood of optimism amongst fans and amongst journalists who are covering
One
us.
of the problems at big clubs these days, when you're trying to unpick the mistakes of previous managerial regimes or previous transfer strategies, is that it's so hard to do because players in the Premier League earn so much money these days that if you're a club like Arsenal, you end up with what I would call a bit of a mishmash of a squad of some very, very good players, by the way, very, very good players, and some who are clearly not up to standard. It's very, very hard, and Manchester United, you could maybe say the same about. It's very, very hard to kind of change it and move players out because you can't get them out. No. You can't get them out like you used to be able to.
Players is not.
And of course, until you get those players out, you can't get those ones in. And I think that's why, for someone like Arteta, it will be a slower process than some people would maybe hope, because it's harder to reshape a squad the way you want it than it used to be.
Okay, let's move on to Leicester as well. What's happening today? I mean, extraordinary result for Southampton yesterday. Given what had happened at St Mary's, few would have anticipated it outside of Southampton.
I mean, they were the worst opponents for Leicester to be playing, actually, because what I've seen with Leicester, and I was at the game against Villa on Wednesday night in the Carabao Cup, where they were maybe fortunate to come away with a draw. They're just tired. It's a small squad. Right. Key players, particularly Tielemans and Chilwell, are showing great fatigue, and indeed he's out of the squad. And then you had Southampton, who are rebooted, who've got this kind of, forward pressing intensity under Hassan Hootel, and quite a few of my Leicester supporting mates went to that game thinking this is a banana skin, and it was. And Leicester didn't quite have the energy to cope with it. It probably could have been more to Southampton in the end. I think it would be unfair to start questioning, title challenges slipping and blah, blah. The fact that even having a title challenge is incredible. But it does underline, and Brendan Rodgers to be making this point, that he needs more players over time.
But probably not the worst thing to happen, in a way, for Brendan, because you would imagine that they would finish in the top four now, which would be an incredible achievement. We spoke off air before the programme started about whether what they've done this season has been slightly kind of hyped up and exaggerated by people in our industry. I don't believe that at all. I think they've had an absolutely fantastic season. Apart from Liverpool, they are the story of the season. Fantastic to watch, great atmosphere. They've got the type of manager that we were talking about earlier, who's energised them and motivated them. Terrific. But you know what, from his point of view, for them to have this little wobble now and to lose a few games, it sends a very clear message to his board and the
He's not doing it on purpose, is he?
The strategic wobble.
As long as the decline doesn't become terminal, they end up seventh. Yeah. But you know what I mean? Because he can go into the summer and say, oh, look what happened in January, by the way. We don't want that to happen again. No. So give me these 4 players that I need.
He's been saying it privately for a while.
Right.
But a couple of things. One, Johnny, on your point. On your point about fatigue and tired, I mean, really, they're 22 games into a Premier League season, and they shouldn't really be. I know it's been a busy festive period, but they shouldn't really be overly fatigued at this stage of the season. And secondly, when you say was it overhyped, then I to a certain extent think it was. I don't think Leicester's a fairy tale club anymore. I don't think it's a club sort of that will be punching above its weight if it finishes top 6. I think in terms of the squad they have, the money they've invested, the wages they pay to players, I think the ownership would tell you that it's no longer.
It's been quite a recovery. It's been quite a recovery. If you look what happened after Ranieri almost took them down. Ranieri almost then took them down and had to be sacked unless he would have taken them down. Shakespeare didn't work out. Puel was, from what I could see, not a disaster, but the wrong appointment. They were drifting. They've done a lot in a year. They've done a lot in a year.
They've done well, but I mean, I wouldn't say it's. I think that the ownership would expect them, for the investment they put in, to be mixing up there.
It's way less than Everton's. It's way less than Everton's investment, for example, who are nowhere near
exactly, which is why Everton's fans have been in a state of mutiny for some time. Exactly that reason. But I do think, listen, they've been good when they've come up against the big teams, which is why yesterday's loss was slightly surprising. When I've seen them against Liverpool, Man United, Man City, they haven't quite been at that level. You expect that. But I do think this is... it's great what they've done. They've played well. But I do think it's also a reflection on maybe the standard below the very top.
Andy, we had a wonderful segue when you mentioned Everton.
I know.
Another problem. You carried on talking. Went back to Leicester, just leave it at Everton.
I did think that.
They're not about the easiest job in the world. Anyway, we're going to talk about Everton and their problems. That's coming next year in part 5. OK, let's finish off part 5. Let's have a chat about Carlo Ancelotti and Everton. He's crops up in Neil Moxey's column in The People this morning. They won yesterday. They did win. Yeah. It felt as though they needed to lift the mood at Goodison Park because of the toxic response to the defeat in the FA Cup last weekend against Liverpool, the manner of the performance, Andy. Just talk us through, OK, we had this sort of so much love for Ancelotti when he arrived, but very, very quickly things have changed.
Well, it changed in that one instance from that game. I mean, the fallout was always going to be toxic from a game in which Liverpool's, whatever you want to call it, reserve team, third team, hybrid of young players and fringe players, not only beat Everton, but outrun them and outfought them. And that was the key to those fans who were, arguing with Seamus Coleman and Mason Holgate, who were getting into rows with Fabian Delph on social media, who were down at the training ground of Finch Farm, in the end, talking to Marcel Brands. That was what really struck, was that, hang on a minute, you can get beat by talented players like these Liverpool youngsters were, but you can't be overrun by them. You can't, I'm not saying not try, but you can't not put in the hard yards, like Everton's midfield in particular. We're not putting in the hard yards, and that's what irked the fans, especially as those fans had seen what happened when Duncan Ferguson had temporary charge. They saw them running further than they've ever run. Yeah. And all of a sudden, it was as though these players have suddenly gone back. Now, they've got a new permanent manager. They're not anymore sort of thinking, well, we've got to impress, we've got to do this, as though they've gone back into into Marco Silva days, basically. And that's what generated that. Ancelotti, to be fair, said, fans coming down to the training ground is something that he's been more than used to on his travels, particularly in Italy. So that's fine. I think, listen, the bottom line is he's won 3 out of 4 Premier League games. 9 points out of 12. I mean, that Everton fans, no matter how good the football, apparently it wasn't great yesterday, I wasn't there, but they said, it wasn't great, but they would have taken those wins. And they're now going to have to get used to the fact that it is going to be a tough job for him with the squad that he's got. Again, we talk about all the time about imbalanced squads, that's one. And it's going to be tough for him. He will become more and more his own man. You will find more and more now the dynamic. The idea was to keep Duncan Ferguson there as a number 2, to try and keep that sort of, that local feeling, that the guy who loves the club, alongside the guy who's a serial winner and a stellar coach. I think you'll find more and more that Ancelotti will put his mark on this team, but it'll be a long process.
Yeah, it feels like it's going to be
very long.
Yeah. feels like it's going to be a long process. Guys, we've got a big game this afternoon. It's Villa against Manchester City, but also this evening we're going to have our tuxes on, aren't we? Because it's the Football Writers Association tribute evening. The recipient this year is the former Manchester City captain Vincent Kompany. Is he a fitting name in a long list of the greats that the Football Writers Association have nominated over the years?
Oh, I think he is. I mean, a couple of reasons. First of all, I think recognition for Manchester City is overdue by the football writers or even the PFA. There hasn't been one player from the great teams they've produced in the last 10 years to win either the PFA or FWA award. And there's been plenty of United or Liverpool or Chelsea players have been honoured in different ways. So it's overdue for City's success. I guess Kompany's the biggest symbol on the field that we've had. But he's also more than just a player. He has got a kind of statesman-like element to him. He's such a great talker. He's been a leader. So I get it. I understand that. I think he's well worth it, and I think it'll be a good night. I think there's other players as well that probably get underappreciated and deserve recognition from the City. You know.
Just quick. That's one of the reasons also, and I think I'm not entirely sure, but I think Andy Burnham will be one of the speakers. It's also a recognition of the work that Vincent Kompany and his charitable foundation have done, in particular to try and fight homelessness in Manchester, and that is as much part of it as and his feeling for the community of Manchester as much as the fantastic achievements over the last decade.
Just sitting here thinking about back to the day that Kompany arrived at City. I think it was 8 million. All this is probably going to be wrong. I think it was 8 million quid from Hamburg. And he'd been playing as a defensive midfielder at Hamburg, and City signed him. It was under the kind of Mark Hughes time, and obviously, you know, none of us in Manchester, not knowing half as much about European football as we should have done, had heard of him. So we checked him out, defensive midfielder, and he turned up. And I think at the time, this shows how far City have come. There wasn't Hughes at the time had decided that there wasn't even a facility at the City training ground that was good enough to hold press conferences. Vincent Kompany, I think, was unveiled at Sale Rugby Union's training ground, clubhouse, which happens to sit next to Manchester City's old training ground they were in at the time. That was where Vinny.
No hashtag. No playing the piano.
So he's told you signing for this club. We've got kind of these ideas. Oh, but by the way, you've got to come to the rugby club next door to do your press conference because the hut that we've got here isn't good enough. And so Vinny, in more than anybody, has a foot in kind of both old City and new City.
Was he the last signing of the Taxon era? Would I be right in that?
I think you are absolutely. Yeah. I think you're absolutely right in that. Yeah. Before the really.
He certainly didn't join the great big Abu Dhabi project, did he?
Absolutely did not. And he is will be remembered as a Manchester City legend, an iconic figure. Just imagine how would be remembered if he hadn't have had the injuries and he'd played twice as many games as he actually played.
But did score the goal that probably won them the title last year, the screamer. Against Leicester.
Yeah, and of course we all remember that, don't we? Because it's such a magnificent.
We do. In fact, that dinner I was referring to, that Klopp attended, he gave his speech. Pep was there, and he went through that moment when Kompany scored that goal.
I take it you're going to be sat next to Vinny this evening.
No, I'm not.
Judging by the tributes.
No official capacity tonight. No.
Fill your boots. Back page of the Star this morning. Pep talking about Phil Foden replacing David Silva. Silva, of course, one of the best players in Manchester City's history. One of the most decorated, if not the best, could be regarded as one of their best, if not the best ever. Will Foden really replace this mercurial forward?
I mean, I'm sort of smiling because I've heard Pep say that for about a year and a half.
Oh, right, we've done this.
And yet he does. And yet he doesn't play him. So the obvious point is he needs more than words. He needs a belief from the manager of actually putting him on the pitch. And you could argue that Silva's been signs of decline this year. Maybe Foden should have played more. But what is interesting is that Pep says, you know, he's got a replacement for Silva, but he talks about Kompany and Aguero as being irreplaceable, which I think shows you how special he thinks Foden is. It's just he's got to back that up by putting him in the team.
Equally, Foden's got to get in the team.
But how does he get in the team?
Well, by being good enough.
He looks good enough when he plays.
Well, why, there will be the whole narrative of the Foden Guardiola thing always seems to point towards and it's not you, Johnny, but isn't Guardiola being mean by not playing Phil Foden? Hang on a minute. Pep Guardiola will make the decisions that are best for that team and he'll pick his best players. If Phil Foden's not on the team, I would suggest the questions should be asked of Phil Foden and not of Pep Guardiola.
Is he good enough to be in that team, Andy?
I think he is, but again, I take the points. You know,
What's counting against him? Age and inexperience. Because if he's got
what's counting
happy
against
feet.
What's counting against him is the players who play in the same area as him are exceptional. What do you put him in ahead of Bernardo Silva? You know, you look at how Bernardo performed against Manchester United, ahead of David Silva, ahead of, you know, he probably doesn't play in the same position, but Gundogan. You know, he has just got so many good forward-thinking players. It's hard to fit him in. There is also, I would suggest, and I think this probably applies to Southgate as much as it does to Guardiola, is that maybe, you know, physically he may not be strong enough right at this moment, and that he still has some growing to do, some filling out to do, some strength to gain. I can imagine that is probably one of the sort of key factors that they're filling in, that maybe in terms of his physical development, he's been a bit behind, say, players that you'd think of his age group in that under-21 team. But that's the only thing.
I mean, Phil Foden himself said last season that he had to have a mental shift of his own, in that he said something like he had to stop waking up in the morning and feeling grateful that he was going to train with De Bruyne and the two Silvers and Aguero, and had to get over that feeling of going in the dressing room and wanting to shake the hand every morning. And he maybe there's still a little bit of that that he has to feel that he belongs.
Curtis Jones for Liverpool scores a worldie in a Merseyside derby. He gets interviewed on the pitch after the game and starts off by saying, I'm a little bit annoyed, I'm not getting more chances. I'm frustrated, I want to get out there. You're thinking...
Given Liverpool could have the league won by end of March, there won't be any excuse then for Foden not to play. Could be 10 games that Pep can put him in and build for the future.
Little word for your man as well. Aguero, you wrote about him this morning.
I did, and I alluded to players that haven't been recognised, and he's certainly one of them. The fact he's only even been in 2 PFA Teams of the Year, nowhere near the Footballer of the Year, is incredible. And one of the things that I like most about Aguero, he scores big goals. He doesn't just score goals, he scores big goals, big teams. 72 of his 174 goals were the first goal for City in a game, which is amazing.
OK, now, as many of you know, this is my final appearance presenting this programme. After 7.5 years, I've got to say it's been an absolute pleasure and a privilege and an honour to sit here talking about a sport that we all love, we still get emotional, we still get passionate about, and we still love to argue and talk about it. I've got a new role in football. One of those roles involves working alongside Manchester United. It means it's impossible to remain independent, impartial, objective on this table. I don't want to compromise anyone at United or affect the credibility of the show in any way, which is why we've come to this conclusion. OK, thanks to everyone for watching. Thanks to everyone who loves this show so much. My final words here. In the words of Sir Alex Ferguson, to borrow his famous phrase, it's your job now to get behind the new presenter.
Sky Sports. Feel it all.